Hey everybody, in EDUC 680 here in what is this, summer 2 of 2012. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about your papers on how you define learning. First of all, just a note about grades here in the class, where I grade on the competency level. You go into the grade book in Blackboard. If you got a 0, that means you're good. If you don't have a grade, you need to check and see if I've left you comments on what you need to do to revise. But when you see a grade go in as a 0, that means you're good and no need to further revise. So your educational technology papers are all graded. Now, as far as your papers on how you define learning and where you stand on the behaviorism, cognitivism, constructivism continuum, I think everybody but one is having to revise that paper. So I thought I'd shoot a little video, cover a topic that you shouldn't feel bad if you didn't get, and give you the opportunity to have a little bit more knowledge and understand it a little bit better so that you can make your revisions better. Here's the big mistake, okay? Here's the big mistake that's happening. Most everybody's paper says something to the effect of, you know, I believe in these two, or I believe in a little bit of all three, or things of that nature. And the fact of the matter is you can't. You can't. You have to pick one. And I know that hearing that, you're a little bit like, wait a minute, what? That doesn't make any sense. Well, actually, it does. It actually does. And here's why. First of all, before I get to the why, let me explain to you that I know exactly how you feel. I can remember being in graduate school, and I can remember being at a conference of professors of instructional design and technology, and I was riding through the YMCA's of the Rockies with the department chair for Indiana University and a very good friend of mine, Andrew Teasdale. Now, Andrew and I were in grad school at the time. We were both doctoral students, and we would debate back and forth all the time, behaviorism, constructivism, you know, which one is which and what's right and everything like that. And I always kept telling him exactly what you were saying. You know, I'm a little bit of both. I'm a little bit of both. And you know, he kept telling me that I couldn't do it. So I'm not typically a shy person, especially if I've got somebody in a close situation. I like to talk to people and get to know them better. So I'm sitting there with the department head of Indiana University, which at the time was the #1 program in the world, and it's now probably top 5 still in the world. And I said to him, I said, Dr. Schwinn, Andrew and I was with Tom Schwinn, who we were with, said, Andrew and I have been having this conversation back and forth about behaviorism and constructivism. He says I can only be one. I say, you know, that's not true. I can be both. Because in my mind, I believed very much. For me, constructivism was too kind of fuzzy, and behaviorism. I like the structure of behaviorism, but I did a lot of group work and stuff in my classes. So I'm like, I'm kind of both. And Dr. Schwinn, I can still see him. I was in the back seat. I can see him driving. I can see him look up in the rearview mirror at me and just say, Andrew's right. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, what? That doesn't make any sense to me. How in the world can that be? And so here's what he explained to me. He said, you got to remember that these different theories are just people's attempt to define learning. He said too often these theories are defined by the instructional strategies that they generally employ. In other words, you know, when you hear somebody define behaviorism as teacher-centered, it's drill and practice, it's lecture, you know, rote memorization, things of that nature, that's incorrect. That's not what behaviorism is. When you hear people define constructivism as group learning and discovery learning and hands-on and student-centered, that's incorrect. That's incorrect. That's not what constructivism is either. Those are instructional strategies. And a behaviorist can use group learning just as much as a constructivist could use drill and practice. The difference is, the real difference between behaviorism, constructivism, cognitivism, is how do they define learning? Which is, of course, the question that you were asked to answer for this paper. How do you define learning? Then look at these three on this continuum, and there's other kind of breakdowns through there, but these are the majors, right? Really, the big ones are behaviorism and constructivism. Cognitivism kind of sits in the middle, but there's all sorts of things in the middle there, but we're going to concentrate on these three for the purposes of this course. So how do you define learning, and how does it fit on that continuum? And so here's what Dr. Schwinn, we just went through and kind of worked with me on, and I got it. The real answer to where you fall in there is how do you define learning? Now, here's how these three define learning. A behaviorist would say, if you ask a behaviorist, please define learning. A behaviorist would say, a learning is an observable change in behavior. If I teach you something and your behavior changes, or if you're given some stimulus, your behavior changes, then you have learned, right? Specifically, some of the words I said there were important because a behaviorist believes that I can give you knowledge. I can teach you something. In other words, I'm sitting here right now as a faculty member, and I'm saying to you, here's what behaviorism, constructivism, and cognitivism are. And if I believe that I can take this knowledge that's in my head and I can, sit here in front of the video and kind of transfer it out, and you're sitting there and you're, supping from the fountain of my knowledge, and if I believe that transfer of knowledge can take place that way, that I can give you knowledge, then I'm a behaviorist. If that's what I believe, learning is, that I can give you knowledge and it will change your behavior, then I'm a behaviorist. That's plain and simple. It has nothing to do with whether or not I like drill and practice or lecture. If that's what I believe learning is, then I'm a behaviorist. Constructivist, very different. Opposite end of the spectrum. Constructivist, if you ask a constructivist, please define learning. I can't. Right? A behaviorist wants an observable change in behavior. They want to see a change. A constructivist says, I can't see learning happen. I don't know. Learning takes place inside the mind. So if I'm a constructivist sitting here, and I'm doing this exact same exercise, if I'm a constructivist, then this knowledge dump that I'm doing might be a scaffolding experience in my mind. I'm trying to give you some information, but I can't really tell if you've learned it because you're going to construct knowledge in your head. You're going to construct it. You're going to take your real life experiences and what you've been through, and you're going to construct knowledge in your head. You're going to, based on your experience, but I can't observe that. But that's what I think learning is. I think that you're going to take whatever is presented to you and you're going to construct knowledge in your head. If that's what you think, that you can't teach someone else, that they construct things on their own, then you're constructivist. Plain and simple. Now, we've got a cognitivist. And the easiest way to explain cognitivist is just, the mind's the computer, right? Here I am, input, give it to you, you get the input, and then you give me output. It's kind of a middle ground, but it's still a different way of looking at it. So seriously, I think on all but one of you, I wrote, watch the video and revise. So here's what you have to ask yourself. What's learning? How do I think people learn? If you think I can give you knowledge, the knowledge can be transferred from one person to another, then you're a behaviorist. If you think people construct their own knowledge, then you're a constructivist. Did I say that right? If I can give you knowledge, you're a behaviorist. If you construct knowledge, you're a constructivist. Ooh, I just kind of got confused in my head for a second. And then if the mind's a computer input-output thing, then you're cognitivist. But note that you can't be anything. You can't believe them all. It's as fun. They are as fundamentally different as it would be as fundamentally different if you look at say religion. If you had a Christian-based religion versus a Muslim-based religion versus a Buddhist-based religion. There are fundamental differences in how they view things that can't overlap. And these continuums along this learning theory continuum they're as different as that. So you can't be all three, and you might be able to see someone else's point of view, but you can't subscribe to all three. Now, I used to think that this was really a big deal, that you had to know where you stood on the curriculum, or on the continuum. Because my major professor was very much one way, and we were always talking about it. He was very much in the one spot, and he would speak out against the other spot, and we had those conversations all the time in graduate school. And I remember catching up with him a few years later, and we were talking about it, and I said something to him about, is this still such a big deal? And he was like, no, I don't think it is. I think we made too much of that at the time. And I agree, it's not worth the debate that we've had in the past. However, the reason I think it's a valuable thing to think about for you is because the way you look, if you can quantify your definition of learning and how you think learning happens, if you can do that, then what I think it does is it gives you better power as you design your own instruction or as you teach. It helps you understand why you are doing what you are. I can be a behaviorist. Say, I can give knowledge to you. I can be in that position, and I can make decisions based on that. Now, let me jump back to something else that Dr. Schwinn said in our car ride. The comment that he made that really kind of struck me is all these instructional strategies that we talk about, drill and practice, lecture, group work, discovery learning, all of those things. He said those are tools in a toolbox. He says everybody has the same tools in their toolbox. Some people might use one more than the other, but just because a plumber has a hammer in his toolbox, it doesn't make him a carpenter. They might use the wrench more, but they can still use a hammer if they need it. The same way a carpenter can have a wrench, but he's still a carpenter and not a plumber. So using that analogy, I think it's valuable to us to know how we believe learning happens, because I can still be a behaviorist if that's what I am, and say, you know what, but I think right now, even though, what's the best way that I can transfer the knowledge to them? Well, maybe I can put them in a group situation and have them work on this together, and I can guide the groups. And then, but I know what I'm doing. The same way I could be a constructivist and say, okay, they need to construct their own knowledge, but first they need some scaffolding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lecture to them for a little bit, give them some background knowledge, and then give them an activity that allows them to do something else. But I can still lecture. So I think there's value in it for that. But all in all, I know that you don't have the background to answer that question when I give you that assignment. And that's the reason why I do it that way. That's my own design decision. I want you to I expect that mistake to be made so that I can teach that point. Another couple of things as you're moving through this class, and I know this class moves quickly, but most of you are going to have me again. Some things you need to remember. Okay, we're working on a proficiency thing here, on a proficiency for grading, which means you need to be really careful, and you need to do good work first time through. We're talking about being graduate level here, which means you need to work to a graduate level. Some of the things that I saw as I went through the assignments this time, if I give you 750 words and you write me 200, that doesn't look good for you. That doesn't look graduate level. A graduate level student is going to squeeze every word in that they can. At the same time, while there's nothing wrong with a cutesy font, it doesn't look professional. It just doesn't. Turning in late work, you don't take that from your students, so why do you want me to take it? When we're in graduate school, we're in graduate school, and we need to be professionals. And that's what I expect. You're going to hold me to a standard of professionalism, and I'm going to hold you to one. So as you go through not just this course, but any other courses in your graduate work, remember, the work that you turn in, especially in this distance course, says a lot about you. So do good work, and do good work up front. Take advantage of the assignments that we give you so that you can maximize your opportunities for learning. But as always, I'm here to help and I'm here to facilitate. This class, 680, is kind of a different beast because it's a 4-week class and you do most of it just on your own. You read and you do some responses. It's to serve as that background kind of introduction to the field. So just bust through it. That's all that there really is. But good work, good first attempt on the How Do I Define Learning. You're going to need to revise those. How do you define educational technology? A couple of you have to revise those, but the rest of you did okay. So as always, if you see a 0, then I've given it the okay. If you don't have anything, if you still have the green arrow or whatever, you still got work to do. So check the comments in the grade book. That's where you should see them. And I will talk to you guys later. See you guys online. Good luck. Bye.